And for today, as I mentioned before, it's about code reviews, code quality, and developer productivity. We are joined by our amazing panelists, Pavithra, Ruphaa, and Mary Kate. I'm going to open up the floor to our panelists to sort of introduce themselves and share how they got into tech and what they do in their everyday life. Pavithra, why don't you start us off?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar. There's quite a lot of you there. My name is Pavithra, and I am a front-end developer at Atlassian in Sydney, Australia. I have been a developer for about 10 years now, and I used to work in Bangalore up until 2017. Um, I graduated in Mysore and then like worked in various companies in Bangalore. Uh, and then I moved to Australia to work at Atlassian. At Atlassian, I work on a product called Jira. And I work on various aspects of it. It's on the front end, we use React and we have our own design system. Uh, so we write a lot of code every day, which is why I thought, I could share my thoughts here today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome.
Who's
Thank you so
next?
much. Ruphaa, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Chetna. Hi, all. Hope you're all doing great, and I'm super excited to be one of the panelists here. It's amazing to meet amazing people here. And yeah, I'm Ruphaa. I work as a front-end software engineer at DeepSo, about which I'm going to talk later a little bit. And then I also co-organize View BLR meetup. Some of you might have heard. So yeah, do attend the meetups next time and I post about it. So that is one thing. And apart from all of that, I have a dog and 6 cats, and I'm planning to build a planet of the cats in secret. Yeah, and yeah, 2 more are also coming, cats. So yeah, that's about it. That's pretty much about it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yep. Mary Kate, why don't you go next?
Hi, all. Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I actually am celebrating my 1 year at Women Who Code this week. So I started working with Women Who Code about a year ago and helped run the front end track. In addition to that, I work as a senior software engineer at Microsoft. And previous to that, I was working at Booz Allen Hamilton Consultancy in DC, working for building out software applications for various US government clients where code quality is of the utmost importance. So very excited to be joining everyone here today, and thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, so the first portion would be we would just try to answer some of the questions that that we have in general pertaining to code quality, code reviews, and we would open it up to the panelists for them to share their views, and we could just go around talking about it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is what does code quality mean to you? And how is it important for you and your organization? Because we all we all write code, but like writing the art of writing good code, it sort of takes a lot of we would need to do a lot of revisions, iterations, and stuff like that. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about the same. So it's opening it up to our panelists for discussion. Yeah, so Ruphaa, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Chetna. So, my past, I've written so much of bad code. Yeah, so much of bad code, which I found it very hard when I came back to it 2 months later. At the start, right, very start, my mentor used to say that readability is very, very important. And I thought, okay, fine, for now I can really understand my code. But then after 2 months, when I come back, I don't even know why I have that code. And yeah, that has happened. And I've also worked in one product which is a legacy product. It's a huge product, and it has a piece of code here and there which it does we don't use it anywhere, but when I remove it, the product breaks. this happens in so many codes. Yeah, I've seen it. Once I thought of cleaning up the legacy code and removed it, and yeah, prod broke, and yeah, what does happen? So I think I've learned a little bit from so many prod breaks, which I wanted to share here. Code quality is significant to me. I think it is an essential investment for a product or any project. It is not just the first simple step, like once you code, that's all. It's not like that. It's like the base foundation for any final product that you build on top of it. Because once the foundation stays strong, right, you can scale your product. The maintenance work, the security, it's very very important. The security is also maintained, like so many stuff around it. So I think code quality is like the survival, it's like a survival thing for a developer, like how we need oxygen for, breathe, right? So I mean, to live. So I think that is what the analogy that I use for code quality. That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. So, how important is it for for deep source, and how basically, why don't you talk a little bit more about that? Because I've seen, I haven't really worked in prod too much. I mean, like, worked on prod code too much. So just to understand that aspect of that would be really, really cool.
Yeah. So a little bit before Deep Source, I was working with a previous company. It is like a IT service management tool. It's like a very big tool. And, maintaining the code quality there, it was very hard because everything was very manual. You will have to, manually, the reviewer has to manually check through everything. Like so many, even debuggers, console logs, it just stays there. The reviewer has to go through it. But in deep source, right, it's the deep source to be I'll just tell you, it is a tool for automating your code review, automating the code quality. So deep source does the wonders of, you write a code and you run the deep source on it. It will give you a product. It will say that this is where a code's going to smell bad, this is going to happen, and all. So it's deep source. The tool itself is working hard for the developers code quality productivity. And so we consider the code quality as the first thing in our organization in deep source. So we once run the deep source tool itself on our product. And then we highly think that it's important for the code quality because of the, again, scalability and stuff. And since we as a product work for code quality to, retain a good code quality, we take it as very important thing. We consider it's very very important.
Yep, totally, totally. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Pavithra, why don't you can go next?
Sure. Yeah, good points there. For me, code quality is like a combination of a lot of things. It could mean it could mean maintainability, as for like how will a new developer find my code, how will they be able to make changes effectively without breaking the uh, experience for the customer. It'll be about scaling my code. It should work for um, uh, all edge cases possible. I should be able to check that. So my quality should be good there. It should be performant also. Things should not, so with every change I make, I should not degrade the performance of the application. So it's a bunch of these things together that kind of constitute code quality for us. So at different points, different aspects of code quality are more important to us. Also, I feel in my organization, code quality is kind of checked at two levels. So the first level is all the automation that you can do. We try to do it. All of it. Like we have to lint our code, so it's all formatted in the same manner. We all follow the same formatting. We look for test coverage with every change we make, and then we look at types. So we use Flow for types. I think industry standard right now is TypeScript, but it works similarly. And we try to highlight any like type ignores that people have made. So all of these things we try to automate for code quality. We also highlight like bundle size changes. We also make make sure that our CI runs tests and stuff on it. We also have this ingrown tool which checks for circular dependencies between files. So all of these kind of help us have a baseline code quality all the time, which kind of helps us deploy to production like 4 times a day automatically. And it also helps us roll back in case of any issues and helps us monitor and stuff. But after one at base level code quality, I think the next level is to find patterns and organize your code in a similar manner. For us, that has been a challenge for my organization, at least, that once we know there are no linting problems, there are no type issues, all of that is solved. The actual implementation of the code, we are still, so that's something that will always remain a work in progress for us. I think that to have some kind of uniformity in what we use, in how we code as an organization, to implement performant practices, to implement scalable practices, such that, say, what if you include a new bundle that kind of increases your bundle size, or unnecessary dependencies, tree shaking, and all of that is kind of our next level for code quality and what we look for in the code base. So yeah, during review, we kind of expect a base quality because of automation. And beyond that, we kind of, we have to manually check for good code quality. And that usually trickles down from leaders, perceived or senior ones. And hopefully it trickles down in the organization is what we strive for, at least.
Wow, thank you so much. Those were some really interesting points based on the levels that you use within your organization for code quality. Like being a I just completed my master's, and I haven't there are deeper things within the industry that I think probably as we go on we would understand, but many of these things are sort of new to entry-level folks, and I hope there's some way where we learn to sort of understand all of this while we study how to write code and stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Mary Kate, what are your takes on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Great points by both of you. I think kind of just to add on, I mean, when you're starting to develop and you're writing your code, you oftentimes aren't thinking of code quality first and foremost, right? But I think the impacts of code quality you see throughout an entire product lifestyle, right? So my first thought is how do you define code quality? And then how do you actually measure it within your organization? I mean, I'm speaking from my past experience because I just joined Microsoft a month ago and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. That being said, in the government space for code quality, safety and security were two of the biggest points. So when I was working on a product team across 8 different software development teams, it was a massive scale project building out a product for the government. We actually had a cross team dedicated to code quality where a developer from each team could sit on that cross team and understand the importance of code quality within the product and within our organization, which for me, that was a great experience to understand, oh, what is code quality and why is it relevant to everything I'm doing every single day? And I think, for example, code quality impacts how safe or secure or reliable your code is. And on top of that, we've also talked a little bit about reliability or readability, which also impacts maintainability. So when you're going to take your product that you're developing, you're putting it into production and you're evolving that product over years of time. If you're not paying attention to that code quality or security, you're introducing risk to your software. So many devs can't find their own bugs. We're all humans here, right? So you need to depend on other tools like Deep Source. We use SonarQube when I was working at Booz. And you also need to depend on your peers to do peer coding to catch those bugs. And the more bugs you're introducing to your software, and if you're not checking up those security risks, you're introducing greater risk to your software. So, if software fails because you're introducing these security risks or you're not actually following any of these best practices, it can be catastrophic for your organization or whatever product you're putting into production. I found that when I was working on this cross team and learning a lot about code quality, You can measure code quality in so many different ways. First of all, is the code you're writing reliable? If you put it into production, is it going to fail? Can it scale? Are we able to actually handle the load for that product? Another good point is maintainability, which I believe both of you guys have brought up. And it's about that complexity of that code base. If I'm a brand new developer walking in and I'm doing this right now at Microsoft and I'm looking at code, how can I read it? Is it readable? Do I understand where it fits into the code base? And is it reusable, which is another really big point in developing good code. And on top of that, testability. Are we able to test the code end to end? Are we able to test it via unit tests? Are we able to automate any of this testing? And I think a huge point I found within code quality, besides the security and risk aspect, is that reusability. If I am writing a piece of code that I think could be reused by another software developer, we want to make sure that it's good quality code. So when that code gets reused for other feature development, you're making sure that that code is reusable and extensible to avoid duplicate code. Because as I said, many devs can't find their own bugs. So if you take a piece of code and it's not written in a reusable way, and another developer goes to copy paste that, and then you would have bugs in both places, which is doubling the risk you're introducing to your application. So it's a multifaceted issue, which is why it's great we're doing a panel on it today, and very much welcome everyone's questions as we go on throughout the panel today.
Awesome. Those are some really, really important points. And thank you so much for that well-rounded explanation about code quality. And in general, bringing up the point about, sometimes we can't catch our own bugs for some reason. I remember spending maybe 3 or 4 hours on a piece of code, and I'd forgotten. I think I'd forgotten a comma or something. It was in assembly language, and I was sitting there and wondering what is going on. And thank you so much for that.
Of course.
So let's move on to our the next important part of our event today. So I'm going to open it up now to now talk about what code reviews are, their common challenges, and some important practices that you follow pertaining to that. So Mary Kate, why don't you start us up?
Sure, definitely. So as I was saying, we can't find our bugs, right? So we have to depend on tools to take a look and scan our software and make sure that we're not introducing any security bugs, which is why Deep Source is great, or other tools are also great as well. And that being said, you also need to depend on your peers, which requires a code review. And I think the first question to kind of ask everyone in the audience, why, if you're not doing code reviews in your organization, why do you think you're not doing code reviews? I think that's a great place to start. In my organization in the past, when I was leading a dev team, we were finding that we were introducing a lot of bugs into our software, not necessarily security bugs because we had good practices set up to scan our software, but we were just introducing bugs because that's just naturally happens if the code is not tested properly or reviewed properly. And the biggest thing I realized, the reason we were not doing code reviews is because developers weren't taking the time to do the code reviews. And it's a matter of figuring out how do we actually take the time to do code reviews, and what processes for my development team are we able to implement such that we can support those code reviews. For us, it was a matter of our Jira tickets. Now we started to include Jira tickets to actually review each piece of code. At the beginning of sprint planning, we would take a look at those core feature implementations, being like, which of these need a good code review? Arguably, you should code review every single piece of code merged into any sort of main branch. But we decided to add new tickets and assign developers to specifically code reviewing each piece of feature or development that we had seen as critical for that sprint. I think another common challenge faced with code reviews is having the culture and the atmosphere for a team for it. Your code is very personal. It's your personal work. It's your project. You're working on it for weeks, whatever you're doing. And it's very hard to be critiqued about that, right? So it's partially creating that team culture for code reviews, being open, honest, encouraging. You did this great, but I see a couple of areas of improvement, and knowing that you can trust your teammates with a good quality review, right? But also knowing that they're being open and honest and they're not judging you for a bug in your software. So I think a team culture is also important, besides actually making sure you have processes in place to take the time to do code reviews. And on top of that, it's keeping up with code reviews, because they take a lot of time, and for a lot of software developers, it's not the most exciting thing to do, but you do need to think of it from like longer, what's the big picture here? And this piece of code that you're about to merge in, that's going to be put into production, is about to be used in a couple months by end users. And it all the more stresses like the higher level importance of why you need to do code reviews. So those are kind of my pieces of advice, but I'm curious to hear everyone else's.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I actually did not know that, I just thought in Jira, within Jira, you would log user stories and stuff. I did not know that we could use it for it is the norm to sort of, create stories for code reviews as well. Thank you so much for that. Pavithra, why don't you go next?
So yeah, like really great points on that. Basically, you are right. Like code review is a form of feedback, and feedback is a gift, basically. So if somebody is interested to review your code, it's actually a really good thing, and it's best to keep an open mind while going for code review. But at my workplace, at least, we have a very involved process before code gets merged into master, because of our continuous deployment. We basically whatever goes into master just goes into production. So we basically have a very strict process of that happening, since we cater to like 7 million users. So our software cannot break, because for downtime we have to pay our customers. So every piece of code we write is very deliberate, and it's made with the practice of many people are involved in these changes, and it's only made as and when required. So we try to not be too dry with it or too clever with it also, to be honest. It goes through a proper process of right from the Jira ticket, like Mary-Kate mentioned, right from the Jira ticket, we try to flesh out all the use cases for that piece of code that's going to be written. So that is kind of a QA, we call it a QA kickoff, where at least 2 or more people are put into context with what changes are coming into the software. And once that's done, people go work on it. And preferably, we try to put in a bit of pairing sessions between people. So that way more people get familiar with the code, rather than just presented with this massive PR of code changes that you have to figure out by yourself. So pairing may or may not happen. So either ways are once you get to the place where you open a PR, a pull request, which is basically a change that you make to the main branch, or change a request that you push to the main branch. So once you open a pull request, then you would want to like have a good description on that pull request, what is the change and how to test this change, and what is the acceptance criteria, what is the change supposed to do. So once that all of that is done, I basically, when I review that code, I try to run that code on my machine and make sure there are no obvious bugs and stuff like that. And otherwise, meanwhile, the PR itself is running a bunch of our tests that we have automated, like our the ones that I mentioned earlier, linting and the dependency checking and bundle size checking, and all of this is running. Only when that gets green is it allowed to merge in the first place. But beyond that, we try to get at least 2 reviewers to review each piece of code. We try to be more personal in code reviews. It's really hard to communicate just within the PR. So it is a really personal thing when you work on it, and it's a team effort. Any piece of code that goes in is a team effort. So in a very high trust environment, which hopefully your team is one. So in such an environment, code reviews usually are not just somebody working on their own and then presenting this massive piece of code to somebody. It's usually a well-discussed change. It may need some stakeholders who are not able to be involved in each step, but mostly like multiple people have context of it, because if there's a production outage, the respective people are informed every time. For larger changes, we use a feature flag. So with the feature flag, what we do is we hide all the code from our customers until it is ready to go into production. The feature flag also allows us to only enable that feature on staging or on a local instance and test it more thoroughly with your teammates before it goes to production. So yeah, code review is not just a pull request review for us. It starts right from the beginning of the Jira ticket, and yeah, and we monitor it until it goes into production. And we also have a warranty period where if any bug pops up because of that feature release, we kind of try to fix it as soon as possible too. So yeah, it's a production level enterprise software. That's what it takes at least.
Oh, thank you so much for that, for explaining the entire process behind it. It's really interesting to see what different aspects of like how important each aspect of the process is during a code review. Thank you so much for that. Ruphaa, why don't you go next?
So Pavithra and Mary, they just mentioned some great points. I'm going to take a few from that. So for me, from my perspective, code review is like an examination of the source code, intended to catch the bugs and to ensure the code quality is better and all. And it has like so many benefits, like both of them mentioned. I know the effort is extremely high. Then you're writing the code. Code review takes more time than you write the code actually. So that is there. But the benefit are you get a good quality code, and secondly, sometimes I've just mentioned I have experienced that it also enables the collaboration with the team members. They share knowledge across mentoring. Everything happens in this simple code review process. It's just like the entire organization code, everything comes under this code review thing. So I'm just going to tell the challenges that I faced in the previous company, and some that I face now too, but how how deep source handles it and how we are doing it here. So the challenges are, again, like both of them mentioned, the time. It takes a lot of time. In my previous company, since it's again million users using product, so we have to ensure the code is very very safe when it reaches the production. So I used to have around 3 reviewers. It should pass 3 reviewers, like every reviewer. So I developed the code in 2 days, and the review takes for around 2 weeks. So that they, in every certain level, they'll catch. Because when I was a junior developer, the intermediate developer has to check, the senior has to check, the lead has to check. That was the kind of process that they were following, and it was very time consuming. And again, the code review was not part of the cycles, the sprint cycle or the estimation. They don't take it into consideration. So so that that is something that demotivates the person to actually review. When your effort is not estimated, the reviewer, even if even he or she puts in so much effort, the time is not calculated, the time is not considered. So that is one thing. And the second thing, what Mary mentioned, that when you're actually conveying that this code, you to make some improvisation in the code that you've written, right? So when that happens, when putting it politely, saying that this cannot happen, this can happen. One time in my previous organization, one of my code reviewers said that remove this code. That's all he said. I thought that I was very new to the industry as well, and I was like, oh my god, I did something very very wrong. I was not able to show my face to my reviewer also. So it was that kind of thing. So if you say like this is not giving an explanation of why we have to remove something and all, it should just enable a good communication and other things with the team. And one more thing that is that the PR, having a very long PR might take a long time. Having it like small chunks, explaining in detail what the PR does, along with some videos and image snapshots and everything, would facilitate the code review process. So here in the deep source, the first level of code review, we have all the CI integrated to our PR and all. We have a deep source tool integrated to it, which captures most of the base standard that you have set for our product and everything. It captures almost everything in the code review. And the other level of code review would be if you want to make it a little bit modular or some code standard that you want to follow. That the senior level, I mean, the next a peer review or somewhere else, they'll capture it. But the deep source tool, as in, it will do most of the weightlifting for you. It will do everything. It will take the burden off your hands and all. So, and we also have so many CI integrated, like Pavithra suggested, we had a test integrated, we have, so many other integrations, making sure that nothing breaks, so that in the broad, nothing breaks and the user should not face any lag in the performance, or yeah, that happens. So we follow that kind of thing in code review and deep source. So it's very strict, and yeah, it might sound that the code review takes more time and more effort, but it's worth it. I'm telling you, it's totally worth it. When you see a code after 2 months, right, you love yourself. I'm telling you, after having a perfect code.
Wow, that's amazing. That's some amazing points that you've put in there. In general, like I think this would help anybody who is even entering into the tech industry in general, because when you write code and it works, and that's sometimes people draw the line there. They're like, yes, it works, and we move forward. But when somebody looks at our code and says, well, this is not going to work, and then we'd be super, like, we'd be feeling low, and like we'd feel like, oh my god, I can't code, stuff like that. So thank you so much for highlighting that as well. So our one other important question that we have today is, what is developer productivity, and how does automated code reviews boost productivity? This is a very important, this is super important, because how, like Rupa mentioned, when you go over level by level, and and everything is like manual, and like there's like a lot of levels to get there, and then it's not estimated. The estimates do not cover the code reviews, all of that. That sort of it sort of like takes up a lot of time. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts about the same. Pavithra, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. So developer productivity is mostly we try to define developer productivity as the time it takes to merge a PR into our code base. Task is started, and then how much time does it take for someone to take up a well estimated task. We estimate our tasks using rough story points. We try to uh, divide it into a very easy, medium, and so on. That's what we define as developer productivity. So it starts right from your local environment for us. How fast are you able to, what's your iteration cycle like with your code base? Does it take 25 minutes to run every time you make a change, or does it give you instant feedback on your changes? That depends on what kind of tools you use, what kind of build tools you use, and what kind of tweaks have you done for your developer instance. Beyond that, of course, the time it takes to code review, that is an important matter of productivity for us, which is why we kind of have some rules during code review. So the first one is, like I told you, no code goes in like as a surprise. That's the worst kind of, like, to receive a PR which you have no context of. That's a waste of time of the reviewer as well, and the person who actually coded it, because once if you see such a PR, you'll mostly try to procrastinate on it because you don't know shit about it. We try to have as much information before as possible, so that it can be async, and the reviewer can have more context. So once that happens, any feedback on the code base, we try to divide it into a couple of sections. So we have nits, which are small changes. Usually these nits, if they're being reported a lot, then we try to convert it into some kind of automation within the code base, because these are small things. Use this type only, don't use this type, or use const here, not let, or whatever, right? That's one section of code, and we just have like two types that we try to give. Then the other is a blocker that you say so you identify, even with all kinds of planning and preparation, you can still find issues when the PR is up, right? So your shared goal as a team, as a company, is to ship good software and not mess with your customers' workflow by shipping bugs. So if you have that shared goal, you will appreciate that a bug was caught earlier and not after it went to production, even if it is late in the PR process. So such ones, we kind of mark them as blocker and then discuss further that the PR can't be merged without that. That's the only case where we use it. It's pretty rare. For other kind of changes, we try to have a follow-up kind of a comment on the PR where we are like, okay, I'm fine for this PR to merge because it's under a feature flag, or it's not risky, or it's not introducing any bugs, but I'd like you to do this extra thing after this PR. So then we retain the ticket until that extra thing is done and merged in a separate PR, which is good, right, to have separate small PRs. So yeah, developer productivity is a tricky thing. Any slowness in any of these parts will hamper your productivity. And if you're not productive, then you're not motivated to work on that code base, and that'll deteriorate code quality even more. So yeah, we try to, happy developers, good code.
So true. So Mary Kate, why don't you go next?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anything you can do to improve your developer experience or, cut down time on each development iteration is so important. And tools are there to support you. They're there to make your life easier. So utilize them, right? And if you're sitting here right now and you're like, my organization has no tools, where do we start? How do we get going on all of this? Don't be intimidated. I would definitely say it's worth taking the time to integrate tools or looking into whatever tools you're using right now and seeing what other plugins you can use to improve your process. I think the amount of learning curve for your development team, or, it's kind of like a change management thing to change your processes or your tools that your developers are utilizing is most definitely worth your time, and it's important to utilize them. I think if you think about it from a developer productivity standpoint, I'll give an example. So it kind of goes back into your Git flow, right? So how is your organization branching? What branch are you developing on? How do you merge? In very much more production or advanced organizations, there's probably already these processes in place. But if you're sitting here right now being like, we don't have any of these processes, it kind of starts with, how are you branching? What are your branching strategies? And then how do you actually go through the process of developing code, pushing code, getting your code reviewed, building your code, testing your code, and merging your code, right, through that whole process. And for us, at least, we at first had tickets. In my org, every team was running SonarQube scans for code quality every single sprint on every single feature branch. And we had a separate development team that was more like DevOps. So they were working quite with CI/CD. They were Jenkins gurus. They were, great. And we were realizing that it was taking time out of every single developer's week to run these SonarQube scans, spin it up locally, build the code locally, find these different vulnerabilities, then add tickets to our backlog to fix these vulnerabilities on top of just doing code reviews. So a perfect example of how we were able to improve our developer productivity is we integrated SonarQube into our Jenkins builds. So every time you pushed new code, our Jenkins build would kick off and we'd build and run those unit tests on our software. And it would also incorporate that SonarQube scan. And at the end of every Jenkins build, the result was a SonarQube scan that you were able to just click, and it was hosted on our environment. So you didn't have to spin it up locally. You didn't have to scan the software. Every single build you were doing also shared with you what kind of vulnerabilities or code quality issues you were introducing. So that alone just got rid of the ticket, right, for every single sprint every single team was doing, and if you add up those tickets and the amount of time taken, that is expensive, right? Because everybody's time is expensive from at least when I was in consulting, that's kind of how you looked at your points. And so I think it's very important to find different ways to integrate or use existing tools to support that experience. Another thing we kind of did was taking a look at our Git features. How can we use Git to do code reviews? How can we use Git to also kind of streamline that process and make sure there's enough reviewers? For us, we decided that we were going to increase the number of approvals. you can't just merge the code. You had to have one peer review and a tech lead review before you were ever able to merge the code. We also integrated Jenkins and Git. So when I went to do a PR or do a merge request, it would kick off that merge request pipeline, build that feature branch. And the only way you were able to merge it was if it was green, which green meant that the branch actually built. So there's so many different ways to like utilize and increase your developer productivity. It's just mainly taking the time to figure out how, and also like being patient with teaching new developers these new, process changes, because ultimately they will save you a lot of time in the long run. So that's my piece of advice.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thank you so much for the example of like, showing developer productivity and, talking about integrations there. So Ruphaa, why don't you go next?
So hi. So maybe Pavithra mentioned like great points. And regarding the developer productivity that I can add on is that minimum distractions, maximize the time that you have, and try to complete as much as task as possible. And how I have been doing that, or in our organization, is that we split it up into small tasks, like tiny tasks as possible. So much, break it down, divide and conquer is the only mistake, right? So we just divide it into the tiniest atomic size task, and then we'll start working on it. So starting from each and every tool, right? Like first you set up your environment, the IDE, like however you want. Add the linters. I make my IDE look very colorful. Sometimes the colors help me to be very productive and all. So I do that plugin kind of thing. I use VS Code. So I add linters and stuff like that to facilitate my coding experience. I do that. After that, in the second level, right? After you raise a PR in GitHub or whatever basis you use, after raising the PR, since it's a very small task, we also have a similar kind of managing a tool for having the cards, the task that I have to take up. The same way we have cards for tracking all the work and tasks. So after that, we raise a PR, and in this PR, right, we integrate like CI CD. We don't have a separate team. We developers, we do it by ourselves. So we integrate, and it's very it won't even take a minute time. We integrate deep source with it. It won't even take you seconds. You just do it, integrate your repo. That's all. You're all set. That runs in your PR, deep source runs, and it does some code review kind of thing, like basic thing. And other than that, we also include some test, CI test, and other kind of thing for test and for unit test and other CIs. But the major thing is that the code review thing, right? Like basic level. So once I've written the PR and the code has been done, right, it's since it's very small chunk, my task is done. So that's all. I didn't take much time. If it is a huge task, if I take it up and if I have to work on it, it's going to take a lot of time. And in the meantime, I'll get distracted and I'll go work on something else. And yeah, multitasking. Sometimes you definitely have to avoid multitasking. I've done that. So kindly avoid multitasking and context switching. Like you'll be working on one PR, it doesn't seem to work. So I'll just put it on the pass and go and work on another PR. And it won't work also. Then I'll just go take a break. So that happens. So don't do that. Make it very small so that it will work. And then also for code review, right, it won't take much time. So at the end of the day, you will have your task checked. That is the productivity for me. So apart from that, the developer productivity starts from the very stage, putting your mind into it, like having the local environment set up and the PR setup. And after that, everything builds up. It includes other people into thing. But for developer productivity, these are the steps that I do. And after that, sometimes I also do this documentation kind of thing for myself. Like whenever I have the time, I'll document whatever. Say I'm working on this component system, and if I worked on some component, I'll just write some small document about it, like 4 or 5 points. And after that, later, right, when you come and watch it, you don't have to go through the code. You can directly see the points there, and it will also save you time. So for me, developer productivity comes when you save as much as time as possible and keep yourself entertained with the code and the task that you're building, which will help you exponentially build the developer productivity that you have. So that is my take on developer productivity.
Thank you so much for that answer, and also thank you for bringing up the the part where you document whatever you work on. I think it's very, very important, specifically like for me, it really helped while starting to work on certain PRs that were really tricky. And it also like the knowledge that we learned from one PR, it could be, we could, sort of extract pieces of it and we could apply it at other PRs. That's sort of what I felt while documenting. So thank you for that. So I'm going to take like a couple of minutes to just, bring up questions from the audience and maybe like sort of, if you guys had if you folks had anything to add to it or stuff like that. Let me just bring that up. Yep, we've got a couple of questions here. Okay, so Darcy asks how to push back on incomplete or unclear user story or bug ticket Jira issue when I'm new in the team and don't want to be disagreeable and openly saying no to owning the issue already assigned to me with not enough context. Okay, so yeah, so I'm gonna open it up to our panel to sort of talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in such a situation before when I worked at a startup. So it can happen that there is a lot of pressure to ship in a startup and to actually uh, not like documentation or even any discussions are basically looked upon as a waste of time. But I think in my experience, these kind of result in wastage of time in other areas where you are stuck fixing bugs or each new change that you make gets exponentially harder. In this case, if the you it's up to you to responsibly ship software in this case, and yeah, it's up to you to take the time to make sure that the code works reliably. And if you have a stake in that project, if you're an individual contributor, say I am working on a side project, then I try to make sure that I keep the code regardless of any change I make, that it should not crash or result in a subpar experience for my customers, because I take a lot of pride in my code and I'd like my changes not to be the cause of someone's pain. So it's up to you to take that responsibility. And as for teammates who push back on such practices, it might take you slightly longer. But if they can't see that potential, it's up to you to convince them to. There's various ways you can do. You can build up credibility within the team by shipping some features reliably. You can teach others, or you can get them excited about faster build processes and integrating new tools. Yeah, it's up to you to actually find a way to make that happen if you care about the code base. This way, you will emerge as the leader and the person who advocates for good code quality in your organization, however small or big it is in your project. Yeah.
Those are some good points. Thank you so much, Pavithra. Darcy also has another question. So how to reach out to other engineers in this pandemic work from home time to get more context on code base, etc. I believe in talking and asking questions to accelerate my productivity, but everyone seems busy. Good question there. Yep.
Yeah, it's a genuine problem. It can happen at times. How I would suggest, like, one tackle way is that finding people for a Zoom meeting or some share. You have to share screen and explain the code base. Takes time. It is genuine. It's there. So how we can also enhance your productivity and also keep doing this stuff is that I start early. I start my work a little bit early, like around 8:30 or 9 I start my work. So by the time I'll just do small tasks and I'll just see if my team is available. And say, for example, my peer or someone, my manager, I'll just talk to them, book a slot in a week. If I have to do it in a regular basis, like get code based knowledge in a regular basis, I'll just talk to them and book a certain time every week, every day. And we also have this one day where we'll have no meeting. So you have to talk to someone, and you don't have to ask all the questions in the same call. You can put it into separate, schedule it for, each and every week, so that you can just handle it step by step, taking small part of it. Instead of getting the entire code base code review, you can take a small part that you're going to work on, or you want knowledge on small part, take it up. You can schedule a call, which won't take mostly 15 to 30 minutes. That much anybody will contribute. After that, you can schedule it for a week's time, and maybe that way, when you split and work, both of you will have a productive workspace to actually learn about it.
Yeah, just to add to that, Darcy, kind of looking at both of your questions, the way I see it, it sounds like you're blocked. Like you're incomplete, you're unsure about the context to fix a bug. We've all been assigned that bug before, and you're like, what is this? I have no idea what this is. You're blocked in that first example, and you're blocked again as a new engineer trying to understand the code base. So I would identify that as a blocker to your team lead, or in stand up, or in sprint planning when you're assigned the bug. And I would definitely encourage you to speak up. I just started, so I similarly am trying to figure out our code base or what we're doing. And I found it's also helpful to kind of identify, an onboarding buddy or somebody who's also recently joined the organization. It's likely that within the last month or two, or last couple of weeks, someone was asking the same exact questions to the rest of the team, and might be able to share some of those resources with you. I know it's work from home, it's hard in the pandemic, but ultimately for you to succeed, it's, twofold. It's you taking the time to understand your code base, but it's also like your team has to invest also in your ability to understand what's going on. So I would encourage you to speak up and maybe identify both of those situations as blockers for you to actually get moving on your stories.
Yeah, to add to that, in the remote context, what I found helpful is, rather than having more one-on-one conversations, it's nice to have them in a group setting, so that anyone who's free can jump and answer, and no one person is under pressure. And having them in a group setting also allows you to use your Slack or whatever chat tool that you use as Google, basically. So when I first face a problem, I try to look for it in Slack somewhere. If someone's mentioned it, someone's fixed it. And if not, then the discussion will remain on a group platform that everybody can access.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to move on to the next question. Sunita asks, one thing I find challenging with code reviews is a notion from the developers sending it that they are done with the code and don't want to revisit design decisions if we step back and see that some refactoring is needed to improve the design of the code. I notice it is seen as a step back and that things need to be redone. Curious if you've seen this and have any tips to deal with this.
Yeah, that is definitely something that comes up a lot, I found. I think it kind of goes back to, talking through those design decisions before this developer goes and sits and spends all this time writing this code. I've often found, if you're new to the organization or you don't understand the code base, it's hard to write reusable code because you don't know where it would be reused, right? So I think any sort of, development task that you get, it's a matter of asking and leaning on your peers who maybe might be more familiar with the code base, or if you're that peer and understand that code base better, to kind of talk through those design decisions from the get-go. That being said, that doesn't always happen. So you definitely get this notion of having to redo it. And at least in my past organization, we kind of called that like a tech debt item. If you're finding a piece of code that, it works, it looks good, but we could rewrite it in a better way. Obviously, a developer's like, I don't want to rewrite my code. Like that takes more time. And I think it's about addressing that tech debt, or, framing that as a tech debt. One of the biggest things I've found is, you write that story, the code looks good, maybe you could enhance it. Adding stories to your backlog, if you're in charge of your backlog, or if you talk to your lead about adding new stories to your backlog to continue to keep up on that tech debt. But it's really important, at least in the government space, we were making 20 points a sprint or at the end of every PI to make sure we are addressing the highest priority technical tech debt items. So I think it's kind of twofold in trying to get that peer review or that peer feedback within that design decision to understand where that code could be reused or better written. And then it's also making sure that after you do a PR and you're getting that feedback from your code review to make sure you're adding more stories and communicate to your lead that this thing should be really prioritized because we're about to do a feature next PI and we could reuse this code and it would save us more time if we rewrote it in a reusable way. So that's just, I guess, my piece of advice on that.
Thank you so much for that. I think you also addressed another question that one of our attendees had on how to address tech debt. So thank you. So one more question is, Radhika asks, I'm a first year computer science engineering student, so is this session useful for me? Yeah, so what are your takes on that?
Yeah, so yeah, good software is not written by individual people. It is written by teams. So you might be able to apply these in your group projects as well to have a superior um, project result, maybe. But as a first year engineering student, if you aspire to work on a team, then these concepts to be yeah, you'll just be ahead and you will know that these concepts exist as you work on a code base. Also, I think if you would want to contribute to some kind of open source project or something like that, all these practices hold true in that situation as well. So you can use them there if you want to try working in an open source team, which is available to anybody, regardless of whether they're students or professionals. So yeah, I still think it's pretty useful.
Also adding to what Pavithra said, earlier when I joined new to the industry, the code review thing was like totally new to me. I heard that code is familiar. What is this code review thing? Why do we even need to do that? We can do it later, no, after deploying it. That I've done. So I would suggest that being familiar with this concept would really help you when you get into the industry and work with the team. You can actually suggest some points that you've learned, and you can help the team build a good quality code. And yeah, then that's helpful in that way. And also, like Pavitra suggested, open source contribution, it would actually cater you for contributing in a better way for so many open source projects. So yeah, familiarizing this topic is very helpful when you go into the teams.
Yeah, those are some great points about open source contributions as well. They really help to get, really help you to solidify your knowledge of how everything works within the industry. Thank you for that. So with that, I'm going to give it up to Ruphaa to talk a little bit about deep source, how it works, and stuff like that. So, yep, let me.
So yeah, I'll quickly share my screen because picture says 1,000 words. So yeah, I'll
Got
just
it.
share my screen. One second. Is my okay? Can you see my screen right?
Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, it's just going to be a very quick intro. I'm going to say that deep source is how you see here. It's a static analysis tool for automating your code reviews, enhances your productivity, it ensures your code quality. So basically, it resonates with all the topics that we have discussed today. So code review does, I mean, deep source does everything for you. And deep source also allows you to pick your repository, integrate it with any VCS provided, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, in just a single click. And I have for you quickly signed up, like integrated it. When you just click on here, you can integrate any GitHub repo that you have already. And here I have like two repos. So this is how the dashboard looks. And deep source list down all the repos that you have. And you can also activate a new repo where you can actually select from the repos that you already have and work on it. So I'm going to show you the repo that I already have. My internet is screwing it up, but yeah. Okay, so I'm going to show you the Democo app, this project in GitHub, which I've integrated with Deep Source. So if you see here, right, you will see the overview. overview which shows you all the bug risks and performance issues, security issues. These are the issue types that we report. We also have a couple of other issue types coming up, saying documentation, style guide. So it just tells you these are the places where there is a potential bug risk or potential risk in your code that you have to correct. So we also list down all the issues after the PR has been raised. And for the repo, it will just list down all the issues. It will just say, with a description and everything, saying that this is a potential security risk, this is a potential, bug risk. And it will list down the top, urgent fixes that you have to fix. And it also provides you with this auto fix, which does the magic for you. You just click single thing, it will replace everything in your code, and it will show you a button to, raise a PR directly. So just where Deep Source helps you to integrate any GitHub project that you have, GitHub, GitLab, or whatever you want, configure it however you want, and add the issue type that you want, and you will get this overview where you can directly fix the issues. So as the base code review, I said, right, like identify the bug risk which can be missed out when you're doing manual review or somewhere else. This gives you the dedicated detailed way of splitting it up and showing you the issues that you have to work on. This way you can avoid majority of the issues, like almost everything, and later you can work on simple issues in the code review part. So that's pretty much about it. But Deep Source has more and more things. I would suggest you to try it out in your personal repository, and please feel free to reach out to me to know more about Deep Source. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for explaining about Deep Source. I can see that it's a really, really useful tool for like automating code reviews. So we can probably, I think we don't really have any more questions because you folks have already answered it. I just want to thank our panelists today for joining us and shedding knowledge on what code reviews are, best practices, code quality, and sort of giving us holistic examples and walking through everything. Thank you so much for your great answers and your thoughts on all of this. And yeah, so in case anybody has like any final questions or something like that, feel free to like put them on the chat or in the Q&A section.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I have a question. When are we going to have the next one?
well, pretty soon, hopefully. It's been it's been a blast to like meet all of you and talk today. So yeah, thank you so much everybody for joining in. And I just wanted to take a quick second to drop in the social media handles and the contact details of of all our panelists. I'm sure they would love to connect with all of you. Let me quickly share my screen. Sorry about the delay.
So I am not the biggest social media person, so I'm going to post my LinkedIn. So anybody here, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
So these are, like Mary Kate said, if the panelists, if you could drop in your LinkedIns in the chat, that would be great. Here are their email addresses and their Twitter handles. And again, the slides are present in the repo that I've shared, that I was talking about before. So I'm just gonna share that as well. Okay. Yeah, so other than that, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And yep.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going to stop the recording.